The 30-kilometer zone was divided into 3 subzones: black, red, and blue. It is still unclear how exactly this radius was decided upon. If we look at the radioactivity map from the CIA handbook from 1996, we can see that the contamination was spread mostly northeast of the power plant, and reached as far as 200 to 300 kilometers. The black zone was the worst and most dangerous one, as it was immediately adjacent to Reactor 4 and its destroyed building. But don't be fooled by this. Each one of them was deadly dangerous, and each one of them claimed hundreds of lives. If you are interested in Chernobyl history, you know for sure that there is a perimeter area around the nuclear power plant. Its full name is the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant Zone of Alienation, but most often it's referred to as the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, or simply the zone. Even if you didn't previously know it, which I seriously doubt, you probably get a good idea of where it came from: the Chernobyl disaster. This episode starts a series in which I tell you about the zone, about its history, about particular areas or spots, about how it looks today. Forgive me a more formal language than I usually use, but I want our newcomers to not get distracted from the main purpose of this video, which is to prepare them for the whole journey around the zone. Let's start. Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, Part 1. Genesis. The Chernobyl Exclusion Zone is a highly restricted area surrounding the site of the Chernobyl nuclear reactor disaster that occurred on April 26, 1986. This incident, which is one of the worst nuclear disasters in human history, released large quantities of radioactive isotopes into the atmosphere, leading to widespread environmental contamination. Located 100 kilometers north of Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, Chernobyl nuclear power plant was created during Soviet times as the USSR fell in 1991. The zone is a massive, secluded area of approximately 2,600 square kilometers, or 1,000 square miles, around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, where radioactive contamination from the accident was the highest. It didn't cover the whole contaminated area around the power plant though, but this is a matter for another video. A very long video, I might add. You may already understand the purpose that stood behind the creation of the zone: to restrict access to places contaminated with radioactive material. But it was not only that. It was also meant to reduce the spread of radiological contamination, because not only the weather could impact how the radioactive isotopes and particles were carried away from reactor number 4. The animals, people and all vehicles and machinery were potential carriers too. The other reason was to manage the ecological recovery of the area. Already back in 1986-87, scientists knew that most of the contamination would not last for more than a few decades. Of course, the story of how were the plans made and how well were they executed is a different matter, but overall, the idea behind them was good. For example, tearing off the top layer of soil in some cases had sped up the process of self-decontamination. But the zone also served as a site for scientific research, and it serves it to this day. Many different teams of scientists, including physicists and biologists, find this place extremely valuable and useful, researching, for example, the effects of radiation on the environment and living organisms. The establishment. We have to divide it into separate moments in the zone history: the one created on the go, and the official one. The first was only a temporary initiative of the liquidators and was soon formally arranged into the zone we know today. Of course, it changed along the way as it was starting as the immediate area around Reactor 4. The only purpose was to evacuate everyone from there and limit access, which could help reduce the casualties and spread of the information. In the immediate aftermath of the explosion, the Soviet government was slow to admit the severity of the disaster. However, as the extent of the radiation release became apparent, the need for a controlled and restricted area around the reactor became evident. The initial evacuation of Pripyat, the closest town to the power plant, occurred on April 27, a full day after the explosion, when the city's 49,000 residents were hastily evacuated under the guise of a temporary measure due to a, quote, minor accident. What was and still is one of the most disputable details about the whole disaster is the boundaries of the zone. They have been adjusted several times over the years based on the ongoing monitoring of the environmental radiation levels. This included the expansion to additional areas affected by the radioactive fallout carried away by the wind, clouds, and storms. One of the key points of the whole discussion was the decisions made by the state officials of the time. Soviet Prime Minister Nikolai Ryzhkov was formally the head of the government commission tasked with dealing with the outcome of the disaster. The decision to design the evacuation area as a 30-kilometer radius zone was, quote, rather arbitrary, as one of the officials said years later. And it's still unclear how exactly was this radius decided upon. If we look at the radioactivity map from the CIA handbook from 1996, we can see that the contamination was spread mostly northeast of the power plant, and reached as far as 200 to 300 kilometers. Formally, the exclusion zone was established on May 2, 1986. The 30-kilometer zone was divided into 3 subzones: black, red, and blue. The black was the worst and most dangerous one, as it was immediately adjacent to Reactor 4 and its destroyed building. The radiation was the highest there, and in later times, the access was restricted the most in the whole zone. The second one, red, has a radius of about 10 kilometers around the Unit 4 building, or, as I should say, 2 safe confinements or 2 sarcophaguses that shield the world from the remains of the building and the reactor. The red zone was fairly restricted, yet it was much safer than the black zone. The last, the blue zone, was the least contaminated. But don't be fooled by this comparison between the zones. Each one of them was deadly dangerous, especially in the late 80s and the early 90s. The blue one has a radius of about 30 kilometers, as Prime Minister Ryzhkov once declared. The zone formally still require different permits and different protective clothing. There are also specific measurement requirements for a person who stays there for a particular time. Today, the management of the zone is under the jurisdiction of the Ukrainian government, specifically the Ministry of Emergency Situations. Access is heavily restricted, with entry allowed only for workers, scientists, and authorized visitors. Despite a significant reduction in the radioactivity in the zone, even these visits are strictly controlled, with specific routes and time limits enforced to minimize radiation exposure. We know something about it. We've been there more than just a few times in the last decade or two. So, was this video refreshing? I kinda feel like getting back to basics, in a good way. I like to remind myself that the zone is so interesting on such a scale. There are dozens of places worth seeing, and probably the same amount of places that could unalive someone in seconds. This was just the first episode of the whole miniseries. I will cover the zone in general, like its history and particular interesting facts, but I will also choose the most recognizable and the most important parts of it. This will include the Red Forest, the Duga Radar, the Energetic, and the Policia Hotel in Pripyat, for example. I hope you enjoyed this video. If yes, leave a comment and share it with your friends. That's it for today, Stalkers. Take care, stay safe, and see you next week.